All right, boys and girls, the last lesson that we're doing for today is C.p.c.t.c, and that stands for corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. This is used mostly for proofs, and it's only after you've already proven that the two triangles are congruent. Remember, you have technically 5 methods: SSS, SAS, angle side angle, and angle side, and HL. So only after you proven triangles are congruent, then you can prove that the remaining angles and the remaining sides are congruent. So when we talk about corresponding parts, we're talking about the rest of the angles and the sides. All right, let me show you an example. Okay, so this is the example that I'm going to use off this book. And since the C.p.c.t.c only gets used for proofs, I'm going to do a proof with you, okay? So this is what's given. This is what we have to prove. So we're going to redraw this again and then do the markings. Okay, here's my drawing. There's no markings because they didn't put any markings for us. But if you remember, they did say, and I'm going to have it right here, sorry. A is the midpoint of MT and A is the midpoint of SR. So if I go back to my picture, if A is in the midpoint, that means A is in the middle. So that means I could say MA is congruent to AT. These two segments must be congruent because A is in the middle. But remember, they also said that A is the midpoint of SR. So the same thing is happening over here. So I'm going to put 2 congruency marks. Okay. So SA is congruent to AR. And the reason for that would be definition of midpoint. Okay, so here I started a 2-column proof. In a 2-column proof, on the left-hand side, you have your statements. On the right-hand side, you have your reasons. Notice my first 2 statements are what was given. So I wrote given and given. It's a matter of preference, depending on your teacher, depending on the book, and also the more you practice, how you want to write things. So you can either combine these 2 statements and make it into one, or write them separately. I just wrote them separately. So I have statement 1 and statement 2, but both my reasons are given. Okay. Remember, I was able to come up with this 3rd statement because of definition of midpoint. Because of the first 2 statements, I was able to say that these 2 segments were congruent, and that's definition of midpoint. So far I have 3 statements, 3 givens. Now let's go back to the picture. Okay, so I was able to come up with my markings based on what was given. Now you have to kind of ask yourself, is there anything else you can prove to be congruent? Are there any other sides? Are there any other angles? And what else we can prove are these angles right here. Do you remember the reason? Vertical angles. So I could say angle MAS is congruent to angle TAR because of vertical angles. So that would be my next reason. And if you look, we have enough markings to prove these 2 triangles are congruent. Can you tell? That would be side, angle, side. Side, angle, side. Remember, I can go clockwise or counterclockwise and I still get side, angle, side. Side, angle, side. So those are going to be actually my next 2 statements. So statement number 4 is angle MAS is congruent to angle TAR, and that's by vertical angles theorem. So now I have enough to say these 2 triangles are congruent by side, angle, side. So MAS is congruent to triangle TAR. All right, now let's go back to the picture. Now that I've proven that these 2 triangles are congruent, then I know the remaining sides and the remaining angles must be congruent because these 2 sides are congruent. But remember, ultimately, I want to prove that MS is parallel to RT. So remember, this next property gets used a lot. You want to think parallel lines, you want to think transversal. Where's my transversal? Right here. Here's my transversal, okay? Or MT, or this could be my transversal, okay? It doesn't matter which one you use as a transversal. They're both transversals. So I'm going to say angle M and angle T are congruent, okay? So if I say angle M and angle T are congruent, the reason would be corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent, C.p.c.t.c. So I have enough to say that those two, and let me put two markings there, sorry. Well, then I could say, you know what? If these two are congruent, those are alternate interior angles. And if those are alternate interior angles and they're congruent, then I have enough to say that these lines are parallel. And what's the reason? Alternate interior angles converse theorem. So I've basically proved that these two triangles are congruent and then ultimately prove that the lines are parallel. All right, let's look at our proof. So this would be my sixth statement. Angle M is congruent to angle T, and that's by C.p.c.t.c. And therefore I could say MS is parallel to TR, but alternate interior angles converse. So this is what it looks like. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to give you guys two examples to try, and I'm going to make it easy. We'll just do like a fill in the blank, okay? So good luck.